exciting to Dr. Wolf.
During a fall 2007 visit to Michigan's Upper Peninsula, a well-known theologian warned about the consequences of greed, overindulgence, and abuse of the environment. Speaking to packed audiences at two northern Michigan events, noted theologian Dr. Walter Brueggemann warned that humans should stop polluting the environment because the Creator will not tolerate the ultimate despoiling of creation.
But it's also the story of God with the land, God as Creator, and the land as creation.
Speaking to over 500 people in Ishpeming and Marquette, Dr. Brueggemann said historically, greed, disregard for the environment, and the violation of the Ten Commandments will lead to the dismantling of creation.
And the result of that is that we have reneged on the Creator-creation question, so that I believe that our work in Scripture study and teaching is to reread the Bible away from those personal questions toward the large questions of creation and Creator, so that we learn to view the environment as God's gift that requires responsible management.
Brueggemann's talks were co-sponsored by Lutheran Campus Ministry, the Interfaith NMU Earthkeeper student team, and the NMU Departments of Philosophy and English. Also, the Northern Great Lakes Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America and Bethany Lutheran Church in Ishpeming. Just prior to Brueggemann's talk at Northern Michigan University, the audience heard from Jennifer Simula. She's a graduate student and the NMU Earthkeeper Project Director and a student leader with NMU Lutheran Campus Ministry. Here's Jennifer Simula.
This is another way that we like to continue our work and invite other people into our community so that we can learn from them and continue to grow in our knowledge about not only theology and creation, but the environment as well.
Brueggemann said he is aware of the work of the Earthkeepers Covenant. During a visit at the Northern Michigan University Lutheran Campus Ministry in Marquette, Michigan, Brueggemann was presented an Earthkeeper t-shirt.
I am aware of the work of the Earthkeepers Covenant, and so I already know that you're into these issues, and I regard my presentation simply as a reinforcing footnote to what all of you have already thought.
The Earthkeepers are quite a group. The Keweenaw Bay Indian community, nonprofits like the Cedar Tree Institute, and 140 churches and temples have put on an energy summit, raised thousands to protect Lake Superior through a classical music concert, and hold annual Earth Day clean sweeps that have collected over 370 tons of household hazardous waste from more than 15,000 residents who turned out over the past 3 years in northern Michigan. All that waste has been recycled or properly disposed, including a wide range of poisons, vehicle batteries, old and broken computers and cell phones, and in 2007, over a ton of pharmaceuticals.
I'd especially like to thank Pastor Warren Geyer for his involvement in helping this event come together. And I understand there's going to be another speaking event at Bethany Lutheran Church tomorrow night in Ishpeming. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Don Dreisbach from the Philosophy Department here at Northern, who will introduce Dr. Brueggemann.
Dr. Brueggemann is a Midwestern boy. Grew up in the Midwest, the son of a pastor. He was educated in a number of places.
Dr. Brueggemann's ecumenical public talks are reflected in his personal life. Brueggemann is a member of the United Church of Christ, teaches at a Presbyterian seminary, and worships in an Episcopal congregation. A prolific author and an expert on the Old Testament, Brueggemann quoted numerous biblical verses and described the prophets of the time as poets who warned about the greedy abuse of nature because people, quote, must view the environment as God's gift that requires responsible management. Bringing humor and simple explanations to complex scripture, Dr. Brueggemann's animated translations invoked passion, laughter, and stunned silence that was often punctuated with crescendos, whispers, and dramatic gestures like a fist in the air or hands clutching his head. The standing room only crowd clapped when he tied abuse of the environment to the proposed sulfide mine near Lake Superior in Marquette County, Michigan, by stating abused land will not produce in the future.
What this poet knows is that absentee ownership and agribusiness, and you can extrapolate toward mining, I don't know much about it, but I know that much, will simply refuse to produce when the land becomes a tradable commodity and is no longer caressed and honored and treated with its own particular creation magic. The land requires ownership that is partnership. And without such partnership, the creation loses its interest in fruitfulness.
Dr. Brueggemann said the mine is an obvious case in which the well-being of the environment and the well-being of the neighborhood are being subordinated to economic interests. Brueggemann said, quote, "In the Bible, the economy is, according to the Torah, kept subordinated to the well-being of the neighborhood. This seems to me a case in which economic interests want to overpower the concerns of the neighborhood." Brueggemann continued, from the perspective of biblical faith, that is always a loser. In describing Old Testament prophets, Brueggemann called them poets.
Because the Solomon party kept insisting that the earth was an exploitable commodity, and the poets kept insisting that the earth was essentially a trust that required management for the sake of the neighborhood, even turning the Nile River into a death channel. It is no wonder, as the Bible reports it, that Solomon's government fell apart in a tax revolt because his subjects in northern Israel were weary of paying taxes to fund his aggressive acquisitiveness. By the time he was finished, Solomon had created a practice and a perspective that was ready to use up all available resources for the short-term benefits of the regime without regard to the vulnerability of the environment. The Solomonic enterprise was on its slow, weary way to self-destruction, even though it took 400 years to get there. That is not news, for every national security state works itself to destruction, never learning in time the limits of acquisitiveness and giving full rein to satiation. What is news is that in ancient Israel, all through the heady years of Jerusalem, there were ad hoc protests and dissents and warnings. While these peculiar voices in ancient Israel may be grouped together as a sustained corpus that we call the prophets, in fact they appear here and there in random kind of ways. So that the way the Bible is put together around this issue is an interface between the power of acquisitiveness on the one hand and the poetry of alternative on the other hand. I think it is important for us to think about who these ancient prophets were. It strikes me they certainly weren't predictors of Jesus or anyone else, but I think they were also probably not social action liberals. I wish they were, but I don't think they were. What they were poets. They all spoke poetry, and they spoke poetry in order that the world could be imagined outside of the domain of Solomon.
I'm Greg Peterson, and you're watching Earthkeeper TV.
Walk you through a bunch of